The closest thing I can think of to an idea in the Bible that's not contested, the closest thing I can think of to a genuine overarching message in the Bible, to like a univocal idea in the Bible, would be this. No matter how bad things get, it's worth bringing God into the conversation. No matter how bad things get, it's worth wrestling with God at that moment. That's the closest thing I can think of to something that is never contested in the Bible itself. Now, that's a pretty simple idea. I think it's a powerful idea, but it's a pretty simple idea. So simple that you can't really build much doctrine on it, and so simple that you can't really build the kind of hierarchically organized community around it, which are the kinds of communities that Christians have tended to want to sort of build around biblical ideas for the past, 2,000 years. But I think that's the closest we get. I say closest because there are technically 2.5 books in the Bible that never talk about God. And so you couldn't say those books are interested in bringing God into the conversation, no matter how bad things get. Those 2.5 books are the book of Esther, where God is never mentioned, at least in the Hebrew version of the text. In the Greek translation of the text in the Septuagint, God is added on a handful of occasions, almost like they were uncomfortable with the idea that in the Hebrew version there are no references to God. But in the original Hebrew version, there are no references to God. Another book is the Song of Songs, which never mentions God, except in like the oh God, like implicit sense, but otherwise no explicit mentions of God. And then the book of Ruth is my half, the 2.5, the half part. There are technically a couple references to God in the book of Ruth. They're sort of offhanded references made by human characters in sort of bleak situations. And God does technically, in chapter 4, help Ruth conceive. But otherwise, God is conspicuously absent in the book of Ruth. What's interesting is that these are the 3 books in the Bible with the most women's agency. God is conspicuously absent in the books of the Bible with the most women's agency, which is something to think about. So, again, the overarching idea is that you can find in almost the entirety of the Bible is that no matter how bad things get, it's worth wrestling with God in that moment, unless you are or happen to have by your side a strong woman, in which case you probably don't need that either.